Welcome to the Quick One Wakili Show. Today we have a great guest. He's a senior counsel. He has been the chair of LSK Nairobi branch. He runs a successful practice in Kenya. All of you have seen him or know him in one way or the other. I'd like to invite him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Johnson. My name is Charles Kanjama. I became an advocate of the High Court in 2003. I first practiced in the law firm of OK Law Advocates. Eventually, in 2006, I came together with a former classmate called Andrew Moma, who also teaches at the University of Nairobi. And we set up Moma and Kanjama Advocates. I started off as the managing partner. Initially, the plan was that I would be managing partner for 2 years. And then I have continued to be managing partner until now. So it is 16 years later, 16 and a half years later. I'm also a certified accountant. Some may not know that, but I did CPA and I renew my annual subscription every year, non-practicing member, which means I don't do audits, but I have the competence. I'm also a certified secretary, a life member of the Institute of Certified Secretaries, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. And you're right, when LSK introduced the Nairobi branch in 2016, we had elections. I was fortunate to win the confidence of members. I became the first chair of LSK Nairobi branch for 4 years, and I did that until 2020. And right now I'm back mainly focusing on practice, and also I became the chair of the Nairobi Legal Awards Trust. So I'm championing this whole project that involves so many parts and so many volunteers and people involved in churning out annual Nairobi Legal Awards for the legal profession. Let me also not forget to say that 2 years ago, I became the chair of Kenya Christian Professionals Forum. It was founded in 2010. It brings together Christian professionals from different Christian denominations and different professional backgrounds. And this is what I've been up to the last few years.
All right, thank you very much and welcome to the show. The first question we start with is a journey of how you became a lawyer. Particularly, we want to see the high school you went to, campus, Kenya School of Law, the challenges you went through in Kenya School of Law, and joining the profession in the early years, mostly pupillage.
Okay, so I was in Strathmore School. I did my high school here in Lavington, in Strathmore, and I tended to be good in the sciences. I was good in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry, and my teachers and most of my classmates thought I would take a course in one of the sciences, engineering or maybe accounts or something like that. And it is true that for some time I was thinking of doing a course in the sciences. But there was a paradigm shift around when I was in Form 3. I can't say why I decided to study law. My mom used to be quite talkative and I took after her. And I used to like reading. And so I thought I had the qualities that were required to do law. So I made a conscious decision to do law after following a process of elimination. I looked at all the careers, medicine, architecture, computer science, and I just decided to do law. I don't know what was my inspiration because I don't recall any specific inspiration, neither a novel or a film or a person who was prominent in the law. It's just that I got this idea of the law and I liked that idea and I decided to study law. So after high school in those days, we used to spend more than a year out of school, out of the education system before joining campus. Around 1992-93, there had been a teacher strike or lecturer strike that had lasted like 10 or 11 months. So there was a major backlog. So in the 90s, if you wanted to join a public campus as a regular student, you would stay out for a year and a half. And people had to come up with all kinds of strategies for how they would productively use the time. So I thought of going to Strathmore College as it then was, it's now Strathmore University, to do a computer course, which I did. So I studied computers. It was a course called Institute for the Management of Information Systems. It was a Management of Information Systems course. I learned programming. I even started working as a computer programmer, also at Strathmore College for 1 year. And I remember my co-workers telling me, Kanjama, why don't you study computer science? You're as good as any of us in computer programming. In fact, you don't even need to go to campus. You could just continue working.
Yeah.
But after reflecting on it, I thought, no, let me go back to school. I think this idea of doing the law was still very strong in me. Then once I went to campus, again, some of my classmates, when they had been out, had started doing accountancy. And me had finished up to higher diploma of computer science, and then they were doing accountancy. And I encountered this situation where you had so much free time in university as a law student in a regular course. I was in the University of Nairobi, again in Parklands campus in Westlands general area. And I thought that I need to do something else to make good use of my time. So I started studying accountancy. I would not attend classes. I would just read on my own and maybe go for some, we used to call them crash course. It was like a 1 month revision course before the exam. So do crash course for one of the 3 subjects. And while I was in campus, I did law. I finished law. I graduated in 2001. And at that time, if you did law in a Kenyan university, you were not mandated to go to Kenya School of Law to study law further. So you'd get exemptions from the courses in the Kenya School of Law, and you'd only do pupillage for 12 months. So that was the custom at our time. So we got the exemptions, we applied for the exemptions. I did 12 months of pupillage. While I was doing pupillage, I also was working in the first, you could say, digital legal publishing firm in Kenya, and probably even in Africa. It was called Law Africa Publishing Limited. So law reporting had kind of like collapsed in the late 80s. Kenya Law Report, East African Law Report, they had kind of like collapsed. And this was a company that was reintroducing law reporting, but now on the internet. So I went to work there. I became their legal editor. I was involved in the revival of East African Law Reports, which we revived around 2000, 2001 to 2 with the first editions. We worked backwards and also forwards. And then after getting admitted to the bar in June 2003, I started working full-time for OK Law, which I think I mentioned. So the main challenge of pupillage in our days, which is the challenge of pupillage until today, is that we are being paid peanuts. And it was serious peanuts. That's why I had to have a side hustle working as a legal manager for Law Africa Publishing, because we are being paid peanuts. And I've never forgotten, and I think I've always been conscious of the fact that we as advocates really need to go out of our way to improve the standards of remuneration for young lawyers, and especially for pupils.
How much do you pay your pupils?
That's an interesting question. I would be happy to answer, but I don't think I should, because I have pupils, and I treat my role as an employer to be confidential about the standards or terms of my employees very seriously. But when I looked at the Excel worksheet that was done by several current or former pupils about their conditions of service, I think I felt that we were fair, but we also need to improve.
So you don't want them to be mugged on their own at the end of the month?
No, I think all of us need to improve as a profession, to be honest. And it is because the way a profession is structured, when you graduate and you do your Kenya School of Law and you join a law firm, before you become admitted as an advocate, you are treated as if you are an intern, almost like an intern in training. we don't treat our interns the way the medical profession treats its interns, those who have just finished medical school, because they are treated as professionals who are fully able to deliver on the services. So I think we all need to up our game, definitely.
Yeah. So you're done with pupillage. Where did you work before the 16 years of setting up the farm?
I worked at Triple Law, where I did pupillage, because I was looking for a place for pupillage which was a bit flexible and would allow me to do a side hustle, because I needed to earn a bit more than what I would get from pupillage. I applied to a few of the larger farms. I was accepted into them, but they were not flexible. They needed me to work 8 to 5 and maybe even Saturday mornings. So eventually I got a farm where the partner in charge was and that's where I did my pupillage. So when I was finishing my pupillage, he merged with 2 other law firms. and Company Advocates was one of the other 2, and Onyango Ohagan Company Advocates was the other one. So Onyango and Ochieng merged, and maybe 3 months later Chinaro joined. This was just around the time the era of President Daniel Moi was coming to an end. So then by the time I was being admitted to the bar, I found myself as a member of this law firm called Triple Law, to become a large law firm. In those days, it had the longer name, the longer version. And so that's where I served as an associate for 2 years before I felt that I should leave to set up my own practice and become a partner. I think I was in a rush to become a partner, and that was one of the reasons why I left.
Do you think there is a relationship between your pupillage and the trajectory your career takes? Like, for instance, if you're trained by a litigator, is it almost guaranteed that that's the path you take in your profession?
Yeah, I have given many talks to young lawyers, law students, pupils, and I always tell them that where you do pupillage has an outsized effect on the trajectory of your legal profession or your career. We cannot be deterministic and say that if you go to a certain place for pupillage, that's it. You can only do this or you can only do the other thing. There's always opportunity for redefining yourself, for finding new places where you can thrive. But definitely where you do pupillage closes off certain opportunities and opens up some other opportunities. So it's quite critical. So for example, when I was looking for a place for pupillage, I remember being interviewed in one firm, and this was a top firm. I'll not mention the name because they are still around today. They had a British name, so I was quite impressed by the firm. And in the course of the interview, after they asked me several questions, they asked me, do you have any question for us? I said, yes, I have a question. And what's the question? Do you do litigation? And do you do criminal litigation? They said, well, we are a commercial firm. We don't really do much litigation, if at all. And we don't do criminal litigation. Is that a problem for you? They asked me. And I looked at the interviewer and I told him candidly, I think it is.
I'm assuming you did not get the job.
I didn't get the job. But the point is, it was very conscious in my mind that even though I was not getting to the legal practice to become a criminal litigator, I wanted to have the possibility of doing a few criminal cases. And so I wanted to go to a firm where at least I'll get part of that experience. And I did. And indeed, in my practice, even though the core of my practice is not criminal litigation, from time to time, I do handle criminal cases. I have a few in the firm. And the other thing is, I did my legal practice in a firm which was heavy on litigation practice. The commercial practice was there, but it was a smaller practice than the litigation practice. And I noticed that even when we set up our firm, we started by being very strong in litigation and having to work extra hard to build up the commercial side of our practice. So this is just an illustration to show that where you do pupillage and the experiences you get in pupillage really impact you a lot in your subsequent practice. I feel fortunate that because of this merger of the 3 firms, I ended up with 4 partners, and each partner had his style, had their strengths, and I learned from each of the partners in the firm I was working in. And I have no doubt that part of who I am today is because of what I observed and picked up from each of the 4 partners. One of them was very scientific in the way he approached his litigation. One was more bombastic. One was more diplomatic. And I saw the strengths from each of them, and I think I picked something from them. Then the commercial practitioner, very systematic again. So I learned from all of them, and I think that's true of most of us who are out here practicing.
Someone would consider the period you spent at OK a short period before you take the leap to start the firm. I know you've told us you wanted to be a partner very early. But what are some of the challenges you think you got that a person who stayed over for 6, 7, 8 years did not get?
I'll tell you, looking back, I don't know whether it was the right decision to leave that early. After 2 years, I was very ambitious about wanting to be a partner within 2 years. I didn't leave purely because I wanted to become a partner. I also wanted to explore the possibility of practice in a more financial or accounting related environment. And one of the reasons I left also was because I was looking for an opening in an possibly in an audit firm, because I was interested in tax practice. Eventually, I did not take it. I did some interviews. I was offered 1 or 2 places, but I didn't eventually take that opportunity. And also, I wanted to do a bit of other assignments and other studies. So it's not that I left purely because I wanted to become a partner, but it is also true in my mind that when I entered the legal profession, I told myself my target is to see whether I can be a partner in 2 years. Now, looking back, after 19 years in practice, if I'm to advise young lawyers, I'll tell them, if you're working in a law firm that is solid, like the one I was working in, don't necessarily rush your exit. But I always tell people, at least get 2 years. 2 years is enough for you to have absorbed some of the key lessons that you need to absorb. So what's the difference between working for yourself and working in a firm? When you work in a firm that is being run by more experienced people than you, you have bigger briefs, you have bigger clients, you have kind of like the ability of being involved in much more sophisticated legal work. But you tend not to be the lead role. You are playing an assisting role. So it's like if you're in a case and you are the court of appeal, you're not the one who will be addressing the court. Your job will have been to do the research. So you get exposed to more. You are assured of growth, but it tends to be growth in a gradual way, especially when you have active partners, because at the key moments, for example, engaging the clients in client interviews, the partner is taking the lead. For the big briefs, you will handle the smaller briefs, but for the bigger briefs, you will not be handling them. So the benefit of working in a law firm which is established is that you have those things. There's one disadvantage, which is that you will tend to become specialized in one department. And you'll be very experienced in that one area of practice, but maybe not in other areas of practice. When you start on your own, you start with smaller briefs, smaller jobs. Clients are not ready to trust you with a lot. But when you get the briefs, you're fully responsible for it. So I think either option can work in terms of legal practice. But because the legal profession has become so competitive, I'll tell young lawyers to check also about their temperament, because different people are suited by different trajectories in the legal career. There are some who are more suited to be aggressive, to go out there, look for their clients, hustle. And there are some who are much better placed in a more stable environment where you're working in a structure that has already been set up and then becoming a staff from within an existing enterprise.
Yeah. You made several very good points that I've observed in my career as well. One of them is on specialization. If you're in a big firm, you do one thing,
Yes,
but you become
really good,
really good at it.
guru.
You become an authority.
Yeah,
Actually. like all my friends would call me about that particular thing.
Yes.
And the other thing is about clientele.
Yes.
I actually had a client who told me, Johnson, you've just started.
Yes.
I don't know if in 6 months you'll decide you don't want to do this thing and go back to employment. So I'll give you a brief.
Yes.
But after you've clocked 2 years. So I get that part. But in terms of clientele, what strategies do you use to get clients?
So the first thing I learned when I got into now private practice on my own account is that most clients come through referral. Most. So it is your work that sells you. The work you did before you got into practice on your own account, and the work you are doing while you're in practice on your own account. That a big chunk of clients come through referral. Sometimes it is even your colleagues who've seen how you carry yourself and the quality of your work, maybe when you're interacting in court or in a commercial transaction, who then refer you for you to get additional briefs. So the first strategy for business development or growth is a strategy of legal excellence. Be good in what you do and be good in client service. Then the second strategy is, I learned this about 4 years ago. I went for a workshop in Zanzibar, and it was organized by the East African Law Society. And that time I was the chair of Nairobi branch, and I think I funded myself because I was interested in that workshop. And one of the people who was talking in the workshop was Karim Anjarwala. You could say he was the managing partner of Anjarwala and Kana for many years, and he's the one who oversaw the rapid growth of Anjarwala. And I have always been very impressed by the way Karim and his team have shown all of us in the legal profession in Kenya that it's possible to grow systematically, to grow big, and with a culture of excellence. So I listened to him keenly, and he talked about the business of law, because the topic of the conference was retooling the legal profession. And I think some scales fell off my eyes during that conference, and I started talking a lot about the difference between the practice of law and the business of law. So the first way you get clients that I've talked about is the practice of law. Do good practice as a lawyer. But also, we have to remember that law is both a profession and a business, especially when you're in private practice. So as a business, then the business methods for building clientele come in. You have to do a bit of marketing. You have to do a bit of business development. Marketing, sometimes they talk about the 7 P's of marketing: the price, the packaging, the product, the place, promotion, putting yourself out there, having a good website, a good firm profile. And putting yourself out there involves several ways. The traditional ways, maybe writing articles, or even appearing in the media, or making presentations, whether it is CPDs or presentations for clients. All these are ways in which you put yourself out there, especially when you want to develop a strength in a new area. And that is part of the business of law. And then about 2.5 years ago, I called the advocates in my office for a strategy session. And I invited 2 lawyer colleagues, one of whom I felt was more or less his firm and our firm were playing in the same level, even though his firm was bigger than ours. This was Ashitiva Nelson, and he was a year behind me in campus, and I admired the way he was growing his practice. And the other one I called was William Maema, who is a partner at IKM, which had just merged with or become part of the DLE Piper Group. And I was also very impressed at how they had grown rapidly and become a large firm. And again, I learned a lot of lessons there, and I really appreciate the two of them, because they came and they talked about how in their own firms, the strategy they take to maintain legal excellence and to grow their firms. And I remember William Emma talking about the red ocean versus blue ocean strategy. And the red ocean is where you're in the part of the ocean where the sharks, all the predators are there. There's a lot of blood and you're fighting for survival. And the blue ocean is like the deep ocean where you are just a few of you. And blue ocean is now those new areas of law, of legal practice. So again, the business of law means sometimes you have to be strategic and to target to become competent in a particular specialization or area of law. You see how to go about it. Will you train yourself? Will you bring someone who's already an expert in that area? So both the practice of law dimension of getting clients is important, as well as the business of law dimension of focusing on what clients need. And Article 46 of our Constitution on consumer rights now liberalizes a bit the previous old school approach that, oh, you cannot market as a lawyer, you should just wait for clients to come, because consumers have the right to receive information about services and goods that they need. So many Kenyans don't know which lawyer to go to, which law firm is good in this or that other area, and it is still a weakness in our legal industry today. And that is one of the things that when I became the chair of Nairobi branch, I was trying to help our profession to improve in. And right now I joined the Practice Standards Committee of LSK, and I'm very committed to seeing, can we revise our marketing and advertising rules to allow us to be more responsive to Article 46 of the Constitution by providing higher quality information to potential and actual consumers of legal services.
That's impressive. I hope to one day drive somewhere and see a billboard of Kanjama.
Yeah, no, but it's not so much billboards. Some may do billboards, but that's traditional. I think there's so many modern ways in which you can do marketing that when you read the marketing rules, they are kind of like not really permitted, but it's like we've even ignored part of our marketing rules. And I think that is where we need to go.
Okay. A lot of people think that the legal profession is aggressive, is dirty, and you need a certain temperament and, how would I call it, and confidence that involves you stepping on people's toes. How does that marry with your idea of being a Christian and heading a Christian body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I was leaving the law firm that I started my legal practice in, and I was thinking of establishing a new firm, I consulted a few of my friends. And I remember one of my friends telling me, Kanjama, I don't think it will be good for you to start a legal business. You might not succeed. And I asked him why. And he said, if I remember his words, I think you are too straight. And to succeed in business, you have to kind of like cut some corners and be sly and shrewd in certain things. And I treated it as a challenge to actually get into a legal profession, run my own firm, and ask myself whether truly it's possible to try and do things the right way and still be fairly successful. And the standard of success should not be making money, but being effective in your work and effective in serving your clients. And I've always treated it as a key challenge. In fact, when we started a law firm with my partner, and we thought, what are our key values? I remember in our version 1.0, our key values, which we have kept until today, was integrity, competence, and efficiency, in that order. That the first thing we are interested in is, to the extent possible, can we manifest integrity in dealing with ourselves internally, in dealing with our clients and dealing with other stakeholders. No one is 100% perfect, but that has been what we've been striving to do. When I've been involved in activities of the legal profession, like when I joined the Council of the Law Society for one term, when I became the chair of Nairobi branch, again, my main agenda was how can I impact on making the profession a better place so that honest people can thrive in this profession. So I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that to be a successful lawyer, you don't need to be either crooked or to cut corners. You can do things the right way. None of us is perfect, but you can strive. You see, the issue of ethics is striving for excellence with integrity. So it's a question of not saying that I reach the minimum of, say, 50%, but how far can I come close to 100% in the area of integrity? If I'm at 85%, can I aim for 88? If I'm at 40, can I go to 50?
Yeah.
And then on the question of now the aggressiveness in how you deal with cases or you deal with transactions, I have come to learn. Initially, I used to think that to be successful as a lawyer, you need to have a certain temperament, maybe choleric or sanguine. This is a temperament that I have.
Yeah.
Somebody who's aggressive and who tends to be confident dealing with people, even in crowds. But then I have seen that the legal profession, like any other profession actually, has a place for all classic temperaments. Even if you are introvert and not extrovert, even if you are very particular about details or you are more peacemaker. The peacemakers are the phlegmatics, the ones who are particular with detail are the melancholics.
Yeah.
Or if you are competitive and aggressive like a choleric, or sociable like a sanguine, all temperaments and all mixes of the temperaments have their place in the legal profession, and they can all be successful. I saw it. The partners in Triple OK Law had different temperaments, and they were successful in different ways. I've seen in my colleagues the same. So I don't think you need to have a particular temperament to succeed, either as a litigator or as a commercial practitioner. You can succeed in any area of law, but you'll succeed with a different style. So it means the legal profession is able to embrace people with different styles and find a place for each of them.
Oh, that's great. Let's now change our hats and go to the LSK Nairobi branch. You were the first chair, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And since then we've been in the profession since then.
Yes.
Even right before it.
Yes.
But we've seen a lot of changes.
Yes.
We've seen a lot of cooperation, a lot of events, a lot of stakeholder engagement.
Yes.
That comes from having a Nairobi branch.
Yes.
So tell us what the vision was.
Yes.
How it has changed.
Yes.
And talk a little about the awards as well and whether they have made the legal profession any better.
Yeah, so I was in the LSK Council in 2012. I was elected in 2012 when in one of our first meetings we were told that we need to go to Naivasha to review the bill, the LSK draft bill that had already been the project of the previous council. So I remember going to Naivasha. The chair of the LSK, at that time the head of LSK was called chair, not president, was Eric Mutua. And we had a session where we went through the LSK bill. I think we took the whole morning going through it because it had already been drafted before we got into office. And one of the contentious points was the makeup or composition of the council and the related question of branches and branch representatives. And we were trying to make the LSK Act align to the new constitution, which provided for devolution. And in that process, I remember the question came up whether there should be a Nairobi branch, because there was no Nairobi branch, and it was felt that because the national office was in Nairobi, that Nairobi did not need a branch. So I was born and grew up in Nairobi. and I like saying I'm Nairobi born and bred, and so I have a very kind of like Nairobi centric view of things.
Yeah.
And I made the point that, look, if you have branches for other parts of the country, why not Nairobi? So there was a feeling of apprehension among some of the council members as we were discussing that Nairobi might become a monster and swallow the LSK. And I said, no, it should not be. But if we have decided that matters of practice and welfare are matters to be handled at branch level, let us also have a Nairobi branch.
Yeah.
Eventually, the LSK bill became LSK Act 2014. And in 2014, I left the council because I ran for president and I was not successful. And then the council, the second term of Eric Mutua, they decided to set up to actualize the Nairobi branch by organizing for elections for Nairobi branch. I was quite excited because I thought I understood the vision of what Nairobi branch ought to be.
Yeah.
In fact, I was there when I was ensuring Nairobi branch is in the new LSK Act, and even in the composition of the council, that there are going to be 3 Nairobi reps. I pushed for that agenda.
Yeah.
And so I was quite delighted to have been elected the inaugural chair of LSK Nairobi branch. It was a hole in the ground. There was nothing. We had to start from scratch. I started by hosting the branch in my own office. When I say hosting, the branch had nothing. It had no resources, no staff, nothing. But my vision was a branch that can have an office, can have a secretariat, can have a council. Since I'd studied corporate governance, I wanted to run it along the lines I had seen LSK, the national office, running, with monthly meetings, with a chair, a vice chair, secretary, and treasurer.
Yeah.
And I felt that the biggest challenge with Nairobi is that we are so many of us in Nairobi. I discovered about 75%, 3/4 of the lawyers in Kenya are registered as Nairobi branch lawyers, which means Nairobi and Kiambu counties. So there's a sense of disconnection or disconnectedness in Nairobi. It's not like the other branches, Coast Branch or the Rift Valley or North Rift or Southeastern and West Kenya. Those branches, there's a lot of cohesion.
Yeah.
But Nairobi branch, we don't know each other. We don't know. So I had this feeling that we need to really energize the activities for lawyers based in Nairobi. And because the LSK Act was saying that the 2 core things that Nairobi, that the branches were meant to deal with, was practice and welfare, and also assist the members in engaging the national office, I identified 3 core mandates for Nairobi branch. One was to really help in matters of practice. The second is in welfare. And the third is in participation of lawyers, getting them engaged in activities. So we set up, for example, bar bench committees for all the divisions of the courts, the High Court, the Magistrates' Courts, even the Court of Appeal. I campaigned to get the Supreme Court to also have a bar bench. It only came into fruition after I had finished my 4 years, but I was campaigning systematically. Yeah. We even started having some committees for tribunals. We had several initiatives, including trainings. We did a session in partnership with Anjarwala on legal practice management, because I felt we need to retool the legal profession. We did 1 week that we called the Legal Tech and Innovation Week, because we thought that lawyers need to innovate, to adopt technology. In fact, I'm a bit disappointed that it has not been there since. I have mentioned to one of my successors, and I'm now thinking of maybe collaborating. I set up an initiative called Lexav, where I now am taking the lead, like as a private citizen, on some of these things I'm passionate about. So I was very keen on that. And it is also in that same light that we came up with the Nairobi Legal Awards. Because we said one of the ways of promoting or encouraging improvement in the standards of the legal profession, of course, you have to talk to people about ethics. We set up a dispute resolution committee to resolve disputes between lawyers. But I said one of the ways of doing it is not just to complain when things are not done well, but to highlight those who are doing things well. And that was the idea of the awards. Can we start systematically every year? And this year we'll be doing the 5th edition of the awards in 2 weeks' time on 25th of November.
Yeah.
Can we every year be recognizing those who are showing excellence in legal practice, and not just as individuals? Because if you are good as a legal practitioner, you are working with others.
Yeah.
So let us also recognize institutions. So we introduced corporate categories for law firms and also for legal departments in in-house and public sector. And this has been fantastic, because we were forced to do benchmarking with the other awards, legal awards outside the country, other awards both inside and outside the country, professional awards like Champions of Governance Awards of Institute of Certified Secretaries, Financial Reporting Awards of, they're called the FIRE Awards of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and so on. And we said we don't want to do the casual awards where the person giving the award just decides based on external appearance or who you like or who appears good. We want it to be scientific, with a stage for nominations where people can be nominated, data collection where you send to the people a tool, it's like a questionnaire asking them for information, with a team of assessors who evaluate the data that has been provided, and with a jury that is independent, that then reviews that assessment report and determines how to rank among those who have participated in the award. So it has been great. We've had a really great organizations and individuals winning the awards, and every year the interest in the awards has been growing. So right now, last year we had about 400 lawyers showing up for the awards, the gala night. It was very impressive, and we are hoping to do as well this year, and to also award important people and to publicize the awards more, and to make it not just an event that happens once a year, but to have a way in which we can elevate the standards of those who are awarded. And you know yourself, Johnson, you got our award in one of the previous cycles. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I can testify that it was a very rigorous process. Very rigorous, I think. It was multi-tired. So with very hard questions. You can't lie. You can't lie your way through. Let's talk about wellness in the profession, and then I'll ask you a few questions that my co-host, who could not attend today, asked me to ask you. Let's talk about mental health issues. How are we doing as a profession?
We are not doing very well, and I can give an example which is almost personal. But in my law school class, I have lost, or we have lost, myself and my classmates, we have lost at least 3 of our classmates to mental health issues. They are pretty young, and the crisis of mental health ends up in death, probably by suicide or by reckless behavior that results in that kind of death. And this is tragic, and the men have been impacted more than the women, but it is a crisis for all of us in the profession. And I studied the issue. I reflected a lot on the issue. Why do we have the mental health crisis? And I thought part of it, because it's not just lawyers who have mental health challenges. Any professional, whether you're a doctor, a pilot, an engineer, you'll have your mental health issues. But I felt that in the legal profession, many of us are operating in small organizations. We are not like the accountancy profession, where many of them are absorbed in corporate organizations with structures, with systems. In law firms, in the legal profession, most of us, at least in the past, were external practitioners in generally small firms. And so there wasn't a lot of social security, social safety net And when even I became the chair of Nairobi branch, I was very concerned about the welfare dimension. How can we be more conscious and mindful about each other? And one of the things I realized is that we need to connect more with one another, because one of the big triggers of serious mental health challenges is isolation or loneliness. You become disconnected from other people. When you're connected to others, they can help you when you're not doing very well. And social media creates a certain artificial connection. You may not be necessarily deeply connected to others, but it can create the voyeurist instinct. You become voyeurs. Especially Facebook and Instagram, you're always seeing people who are successful and thriving. They did this. And especially if you're a man, but it's not only for men, we start comparing ourselves in terms of, these guys have achieved so much, where am I? And it can be very depressing or discouraging. Sometimes also, the reason why the mental health issues come is because of the stakes of our profession and the way it is organized. I think in that sense we are a bit like doctors. If you are a medical practitioner and you find you are losing patients left, right, and center because the facilities in the hospitals are not there or they are not working, it can be very very damaging to your psyche. And the same thing happens to us, because you are there to fight for rights of people. The legal justice system was broken to a certain extent, and actually one of the motivations I had for taking positions of leadership in the legal profession was to try and mend those areas where I saw the legal profession was broken. Because you have a case that's been going on for 5, 7, 9 years. Your client has died out of grief and despair while he's waiting for justice. You've lost cases you shouldn't have lost. A lot of trickery, even maybe corruption has come in, and injustice has been done. And this is another trigger for a feeling of hopelessness or helplessness, that I'm not achieving what I thought I would achieve by becoming a lawyer. And so all these are triggers. And then you have the other triggers which have to do with just social living, family breakup, family challenges. If you don't have that network that can help you to deal with the ups and downs of normal living, then you find the pressures come and nobody knows what you're up to. You're on your own. Maybe you're not getting the money that you expected you'll get, or you are getting it in ways that are dirty, and it is not giving you the satisfaction you thought it would give you. So it has created a bit of a mental health crisis. We need to deal with it. We need to create more awareness about the issue. We need to get the experts, the counselors and so on, to come and engage us. We need to receive courses even through CPD on this wellness, mental wellness. What are the aspects of wellness? Because mental wellness sometimes is triggered by lack of health in other areas of our life, whether it is spiritual, whether it is physical, whether it is even financial. So how do you be holistically healthy in all these areas? So I think there are many things to be done. And definitely the leadership of the profession has been aware of it, and they're making a few steps in the right direction.
And we've seen a lot of CPDs on mental health also.
Yes.
So that's a good thing. Let's talk about physical health. I know there's someone who told me, if you don't take care of your body, nothing else will ever happen for you. Because it's the vehicle through which you carry on in this life. And there have been a lot of stories in the media about your weight loss journey. I won't go way back, but what I would want you to tell us is, if I'm struggling with weight right now, what would you recommend as a person who has gone through it?
I'm not an expert in issues of physical health and nutrition, but I have learned quite a bit. And around the time when the COVID crisis started, we were being insured by AAR, and one of my staff in the office said, Kanjama, I think we can invite AAR to give us a complimentary wellness talk, and I think they also do a health camp of some kind. and it's free if you're insured by AR. So I said, okay, fine, invite them. So they came, and that was 2.5 years ago. They gave a health talk. They took our vitals. And some of us men especially, we don't visit the hospital often. So things deteriorate until a certain moment you realize that things are not working the way they should. So I remember when I went for that health test, because it was voluntary, it was in the boardroom in my office.
Yeah.
I went, they weighed me, they took my height, they took my... they tested certain things. I remember what they told me is at first, you are overweight, you are, in fact, you are borderline blood pressure, you are getting borderline, you are getting high blood pressure. In fact, even when they measured my height, I distinctly remembered that my height, I used to be taller. So I was wondering, how can I be fatter, have become shorter, I'm now having high blood pressure. So in the process of that one, the lady who was leading that health team, she said that if you want to lose weight, let me tell you, the thing to keep in mind is that 80% of weight loss is nutrition and 20% is exercise. And that was like a paradigm shift for me, because I'd always thought that the most important element of weight management or weight loss is actually exercise. Maybe I would have said 60 or 70% exercise and 30% nutrition.
Yeah.
And then the day after that interaction, I met a former classmate from high school who had lost 30 kilograms, 30 kgs. Wow. And I had lunch with him. And so the whole lunch he was explaining to me how he lost weight. And he was not the only one. I'd met one or two other classmates, and they had given me the same story. But it hit. This was my teachable moment. Yeah. And so I learned that the mechanisms for dealing with nutrition, the biggest culprit to weight gain, that causes weight gain, is the amount of carbohydrates that we take, because the carbs really push in a lot of calories. And so as you're growing older, your metabolic rate starts reducing, and yet your consumption, especially if you're becoming more prosperous, it starts increasing. It starts increasing. You're eating more, you're eating all kinds of food, and you're exercising less. So it is no wonder that we have weight gain as a crisis in middle age. Yeah. And so there are different strategies for managing calories, but I think the most important is don't do anything crazy. Don't go on a special diet where you stop eating the normal foods, but try and avoid a few things that cause a lot of weight gain: sugary drinks, sugary snacks, and then some of these fast foods. And try to avoid having eating carelessly. Eat only at meal times. This snacking in between meals, I think, is a key issue. And then check your portion sizes, and check, most importantly, the amount of carbs that you're consuming. Yeah. And of course, you also need to recognize that on the exercise part, I used to think that for weight loss, exercise meant cardiovascular exercise, that it means jogging, walking, etc. And what I discovered is that cardiovascular exercise is important, but is only one of the two kind of exercises you need to do to do good weight loss or weight management. Because cardiovascular exercise basically increases the metabolism during that time that you're doing the exercise. But this other kind of exercise, which is what is called weight training or resistance exercises, things like push-ups, calisthenics, for example, or what you may do in a gym, they actually help you to improve your metabolic rate, your base metabolic rate. That then means that the whole day you are consuming more calories. Because you are building more muscle, and this muscle then results in a higher rate of calorie consumption. So that's more or less a summary, but I can give a whole class on the topic, even though I'm not an expert, but I read a lot about
we'll
it.
call you for part 2.
Okay.
So my co-host Mutua, who unfortunately could not attend, requested me to ask you whether your perception on the practice that you engage in changed when your client was shot.
Yeah, so Johnson, this was a really tragic incident, and the matter has never been resolved as it should have been. In the year 16 or 17, a few years back, I had a client called Idris Mukhtar, and he was my client. I handled for him an employment case. He was a member of the County Executive Committee of Garissa, and he had just given me instructions to take up a second case that involved challenging the academic qualifications of the governor of Garissa. And before the case could be initiated, he was shot in the head, and he ended up in a coma. Fortunately, he did not die, but unfortunately, he's been in a coma for the last 4 years. So it's a really tragic situation. And when the police were doing the investigations, they found out that the hitman had been targeting both my client and myself. And this information came from their investigation. So I learned about it when I was called to CID Nairobi area, and to be asked, why would somebody be targeting both you and your client? And the hitman was actually arrested. And it is unfortunate that within a space of 2 days or something, he was transferred to Parklands police station, and he allegedly hanged himself while he's in custody in a very busy police station. And many people suspect that it was actually premeditated assassination by some senior people in government. But because of that, the evidence gathering phase kind of like was cut short. The investigations were moved from the CID Nairobi area to the CID headquarters, and it is quite unfortunate what happened. So there is a criminal case that's going on in which 2 people have been charged, but at some point in time, the investigations were tending towards some more senior suspects in government. And of course, when the investigations were done, it was discovered that the assassin, the intended assassin, because of course my client is not dead but is in a coma.
Yeah.
The intended assassin came to my office, and he came with one of the people who is a suspect in court, and that the reason they came to my office was so that I could be pointed out to this assassin who was targeting both of us. That happened when I was in the annual conference in Mombasa, so I was not there. Although the lady who was accompanying the targeted assassin came to me at a later occasion, posing as a client, and I did a consultation with her. So that is what happened. So I remember that was just one incident that I had to deal with when I was the chair of Nairobi branch.
Yeah.
I also dealt with the incident of Willie Kimani, who was assassinated just a few months after I'd become the chair of Nairobi branch, and we led the demonstrations of lawyers, we did marches, we addressed the media, we did a lot of agitation and advocacy. And the question is, has that changed my perception of legal practice? One of the lawyers, senior lawyers who has been involved in all kinds of hairy situations is John Haminwa, whom I respect greatly. He's practiced law for over 50 years. And John Haminwa met me one of those days in the court corridors, and he told me some of his stories. And he told me, Kanjama, please be careful about your safety. Don't take it for granted. And he gave me a lot of tips and he said he has experienced those kind of situations. And if you are a lawyer who deals with a few matters of this kind, the time may come when you need to be a bit more conscious of your safety. It should not make you step back and avoid helping clients who are in need of justice or in need of your help, because that is our role. And when we took the advocate's oath, we took an oath to promote or support the administration of justice and the rule of law without fear or favor.
Yeah.
So that means fear cannot be what guides us or governs us in our decisions as lawyers. It has to be the pursuit for justice.
Yeah.
So in a sense, every incident, every experience you have as a legal profession does affect you, does impact you, but it should not impact you towards cowardice or fear that makes you unwilling to confront injustice or unwilling to stand for what is right or what is fair.
Wow, quite the story. Let's shift gears now to my last question, and this is about being a senior counsel. So maybe you can tell us what changed, some of the experiences you've had. I know we had a preliminary conversation on how, in your opinion, what should matter most is the responsibility that comes with it. But talk about the perks and then tell us about what you think in terms of responsibility.
Okay, so let me start by clarifying for the listeners that when we got the new LSK Act around the same time, there was an amendment to the Advocates Act that created rules for senior counsel and some provisions on senior counsel. So there is a process, it's a scientific process that has not been implemented very systematically in the past, but I expect to be implemented systematically going forward. So every year there's meant to be, first of all, a senior counsel committee that has, I think, about 10 members. 3 representatives of the senior counsel bar, 2 representatives of the Law Society, the president of LSK, a judge of the High Court, of the Court of Appeal, and of the Supreme Court, and a representative of the Attorney General. So this is a senior counsel committee. So every year they are meant to invite applications for people who would like to be conferred with the rank of senior counsel. And there are various conditions put there which you need to meet. So you have to do an application. The most significant is you must be at least 15 years in practice. Then you need to demonstrate that you've handled important cases in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court, which I had, that you've been involved in leadership of the legal profession or in something of similar nature, where you've given back to the profession, which I was able to demonstrate, that you've been involved in mentorship, whether it is law students, pupils, etc., and you need to demonstrate that one. You also need to show something about your writing, your impact on the legal profession through academic writings or those kind of things. And there are a few other requirements that are there. So once you receive the invitation, you put together your application and you forward it through the Law Society of Kenya. So then the Senior Counsel Committee considers those applications, and if they are satisfied, then they will shortlist you and they'll recommend you for conferment of the rank of Senior Counsel. And they recommend to the Chief Justice. So the Chief Justice also needs to be satisfied, and then she forwards the names to the President. And it is the President who confers the rank of Senior Counsel, and then the Chief Justice witnesses when you sign the role of Senior Counsel. So because of the previous inconsistency in this practice, there have not been so many Senior Counsel. Right now we are less than 60, I think. And there are several senior lawyers who actually deserve to become Senior Counsel, and I hope they will apply in the next installments. Once you become Senior Counsel under the Advocates Act, you have a right or privilege of precedence, and that means it is a privilege to be ranked just below the Attorney General, the DPP, and the Solicitor General in the order of ranking, ahead of other advocates. This business of hierarchy does not mean that you are a better lawyer or that you offer better service. But a recognition by your peers, of course, is something that is to be appreciated and treasured.
Yeah.
And it means something. So the privileges that then are given depend on the law society, on the judiciary, and whichever other organization is dealing with lawyers. Right now, for the judiciary, what they have decided is that senior counsel should have the privilege of addressing the court first. That means they have benchmarked with the institution of senior counsels in other countries, Queen's Counsel or now King's Counsel in the UK, senior counsel in South Africa and elsewhere. And the privilege of precedence means if you are in court, your matter is called out first, or you address the court first, or you are now senior to the other lawyers. So that is really the approach in terms of within the legal practice in courts. In the legal profession, the Law Society of Kenya can always craft certain privileges for senior counsel. Other organizations, institutions, even the Ministry of Lands, the Companies Registry could also do the same. And the question is, why should there be any privileges for senior counsel? Incidentally, I was in the Law Reform Committee of LSK around 2009-2010 when the then counsel requested us to come up with some rules for senior counsel. And my first reaction was, why should we even have rules? Why should we even have senior counsel? That time the chair of the committee was Otiende Amolo, who later became a member of I think he was in the committee of experts. No, he became, yes. And then he became a member of the first ombudsman, the chair of the Commission on Administration of Justice. And he did a lot of the work. We assisted. We came up with some rules. And so we said that there'll be a few privileges. One or two are mentioned, and any others that may be recommended in future. So we left it open. But I remember for me, the thought was, why should there be privileges? Because you cannot give privilege just as a reward without an expectation for something in return. So for me, I'm very conscious of the fact that being senior counsel should not be about the privileges. It should be more about the call to duty, the call to action. Now that you've been recognized, what does it mean? And I do recall there were fantastic speeches when we were assigning the role from the chair of the Senior Counsel Bar, Fred Ojiambo, from the Chief Justice, and one or two other speakers. They gave fantastic speeches about what is the expectation of senior counsel. And one of the key expectations is mentorship of other lawyers. You need not to sit back now that you've become senior counsel, but to do more in terms of mentorship. So it's an active call to mentorship. Two, it's a call to reflect the nobility of the profession. So if before you are striving for excellence, strive for it even more, because that is how you can give an example to other lawyers to say, this is what I would like to be. This person has been put on a pedestal so that they can reflect how the legal profession should be. And it doesn't mean that when you become senior counsel, suddenly you are better than others. It's just that you need to try and put more effort. And then, of course, there has to be something else you are able to do. Right now, I'm looking forward to engaging the chair of the Senior Counsel Bar to explore other ways in which senior counsel can become more visible and more active in discharging their role or their responsibility as senior counsel. And I think it is a work in progress.
I'll ask the last question, because I had said that was the last one. But I'm seeing a gap there in terms of the eligibility criteria. For some of us who don't go to court, who have not practiced or have not represented anyone in the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, and in this case I'm thinking of your good friend who you praised a lot in in teaching you the business of the law, where is the place of a person who does not go to court?
That's a very good question. And I know when I was in the Council of the Law Society, I did one term, 2012 to 2014. The second cohort, I think it was, of Senior Counsel were being considered for admission. And when lawyers were asked to recommend names, most of them did not recommend because it was a new thing and people didn't bother. And so the Senior Counsel Committee then requested the Council of LSK, can you also recommend some names? So we had a discussion about the issue. And I think we were conscious about a number of things. One, that there is need for diversity in terms of who becomes Senior Counsel. Diversity includes gender diversity, includes practice diversity, even regional diversity. That Senior Counsel should be able to reflect the face of the profession. And when we were being asked to give our own suggestions and in that discussion, I remember I made one or two suggestions, one of whom was a lecturer that I really admired who taught me in university. And she was not an active practitioner in a law firm, but she had really distinguished herself in academia, in research, and in so on. And the Committee of Senior Counsel, despite the fact that the rules were there, they interpreted them in such a way as to say that for those who are not litigators, we look for an equivalent.
I see.
So that means somebody who's an expert in or is distinguished themselves in academia or in conveyancing and commercial practice, like yourself, Johnson, or an in-house counsel should also be able to stand a chance to become Senior Counsel. However, the challenge is that in most of the countries we were benchmarking from, Senior Counsel tend to be largely, if not exclusively, largely awarded to litigating lawyers. And it is litigating lawyers who tend to enjoy the privileges, because the privileges are also designed for litigating lawyers. Like now,
that's what I wanted to say, actually.
when I take an application to Ministry of Lands, I'm not given priority because I'm doing a conveyance.
Even in a commercial transaction, you have to make your point.
Yes. So the point is, we have to reimagine the Senior Counsel bar and make it fit for the 21st century in Kenya. And that means when the amendments are being done to the rules and to the Advocates Act, it would be important to now make recommendations so that you can have Senior Counsel who reflect the different diversities of practice. If you are really good as an IP practitioner, why can't you become a Senior Counsel, recognized as an expert in IP and a Senior Counsel?
Or an equivalent to a Senior Counsel, whatever it would be. All right. I would like to thank you very much for showing up today. We have really enjoyed the show. And I'm sure our listeners will enjoy learning from you. And all the best.
Thanks.
Bye. So. The last stick. Last stick. Okay? We haven't done this in like 8 months now. Was it 8 months?